Guys, so welcome to the second video in this series where we're going to do the CSS for the animation. So here we've gone ahead and we've created the HTML, which is all right here. And if you're familiar with HTML, you're going to know that this is going to be really horrible. In fact, it's going to look just like this. You can't even see the disk here for the ball container, or the ball shadow at this point because it doesn't have a height or width set. Now they're currently just at a height and width, I guess, of 0. Can't actually see anything. And we just have this really just mixed here in the button. So now to CSS and actually fix all of that and make it look cool, and also get those animation aspects hooked up as well. So to do that, go ahead, and I've already created a style sheet here. Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and in the index.html, I'm going to actually do a link to that CSS. So we're just going to do the link rel style sheet. In this case, it's going to be .style, and that should link up our page to our CSS page. So if we come over to the style CSS page and something like select all, and I say background red, and we save that. If I go over here, you can see now we have a very red background on this page here. So we got that hooked up. So we're going to get rid of that. It's horribly painful. And actually, I'm going to be using the all selector in this particular file. So fine. All right. So to go ahead and get started, what we're going to do is we're going to actually go ahead and just start our root variables. And again, the reason I like doing this is because it lets me just change variables in one place across everything in the page I need to later. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Put the colon key and then root. And in that, we're going to set up some variables for color. So we're going to set up our black with the, let me say this, I'm typing it, the black, the slash, or the dot, or dash dash. So dash dash, and then we're going to say, and we're going to set that equal to this value, which is going to be just a slightly off black, going to be a pure black. But it's going to be very, very, very close. As you can see here, it's almost a pure black. So, and then we're going to do the same thing for our white, which I'm going to do an off white. This and make sure colons in there. Cool. And so then just to kind of go ahead, we're going to here. We are going to just, I'm going to copy and paste a few other project that I already wrote out. So to write those by hand, and these are just the other they're going to be using later on. So we don't need that one, and we're going to change this just to background for this project. Cool. So basically, we just declared a black color here, a white color, a variable for our background color, a variable here for the ball as a solid. We have a variable here for a ball as the gradient, which is going to help to kind of make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. So I went ahead and do that, and I got that from a actual online CSS gradient tool, which I will put the link in the description below after the video. So you can go ahead with that if you want to as well. And then I also created this variable here for a shadow. One other variable that I'm going to create for this project in particular that I don't normally do is I'm going to create a second variable here, and this is actually going to be information. The reason I did, I was working through this project, I realized that I had to go through and change duration to effectively change the speed of the animation several times when I was done with positioning, the squash and stretch effects, and things like that. And it was really going to go through and constantly change different places, the timings, to make sure everything was matching correctly. So instead of doing that way, I went ahead and just created a single variable that contained the timing that I wanted. And in that way, I could just reference that variable in the actual animations themselves, and I only have to change it up here in the root variable, and it would automatically change it where I called that variable inside those animations later. And you'll see that now later on in this video. That was animation duration. And again, whatever you want. I just chose as it made sense to me at the time, but you can name it, anything you wanted. And I'm going to put that 0.75 seconds. Cool. So now we have variables here, and for the rest of this, I'm just going to put in some initial styling. So we have our body, and I'm actually going to again cut these. I don't have to spend a lot of time writing all this stuff out because this is going to be long enough as it is. Let's see. So body, we're just doing basically 100% of the viewport height, the viewport width, declaring the background color as this background variable up here. For the header, again, I'm just going to do some real simple, change the font a little bit, and it's going to be right here. So again, we're setting it as a auto for height, make it a fixed width to 600 pixels, give it a I'm doing a margin pop, and then I'm auto here, but the right margin says auto, which is going to then center it, and then no margin on the. I also getting a text align center so that all the text is going to be in the center. Give it font family here, and of course we're calling it color is going to be the black that we declared up here. And the rest of these, I go ahead and copy them, including the ball container. So these are going to be all of the fixed elements page itself. So this the body, the header, that paragraph that was going to be subsection right here. And then of course we have the main, which let me go ahead and just put this in a separate window here so we can see a little better. So this is the main, which is going to be this here. So everything contained in here is going to be inside of that. Of course, not really doing a lot of support at all for this project. And then of course the ball container itself, which is here the actuation is going to be taking place inside. So that's the, I guess, fixed styling that's going to be happening. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start the animation styles this here, and we'll go ahead and put a little comment here so we're working. And just to go double check that, let's go ahead and save everything as it is right now. We'll go to another live server. Now what we is basically everything except for the ball and shadow, which you see right here. We now have everything except for the ball and the shadow. I also put an set drop shadow here inside this. So instead of doing a normal drop shadow, I just did inset is right here, block shadow. And what that does is instead of shadow being over here and kind of coming out this way and this way, it instead is put up here and it goes inside. So the effect I was going for, wanted to look like this was maybe a sheet of paper, and then there was a cutout sheet of paper inside of it where the actual animation is going to be taking place. And again, that was a specific thing that I wanted to do because I thought it looked kind of cool for this project. You can do whatever you want to there. You don't even necessarily need to have it inside of a container like this if you didn't want to. And again, if you're doing like something that you want to have bounce when you scroll over it, then you wouldn't need it all. So again, it's just kind of something I did just for the purposes of this project, but you can change up the styling however you want for purposes. Okay, cool. So now we're going to start getting to itself. So, the balls and the shadow and all the stuff here, as well as the animations. So to get that started, we're going to go ahead and this, we're going to get the ball that we're going to be creating here. I'm going to put a position this, and the reason I'm doing this isn't necessarily you would have to do. I'm doing it like this because I put that shadow in, and when the ball bounces and hits the ground, I want it to look as though the ball is hitting the midpoint of that shadow instead of it having the shadow in front of it or behind it. And that's something you can play around with. When I did it originally, I actually had it where the shadow away to nothing, so it didn't really matter and didn't have positioning on there. But I felt like if it was coming from the very, very top, then even when the ball falls, it's still getting a bit of a shape. If you look at my hair, you can still see the shadow there. So I kind of played around with that, and this is how I decided to solve that problem, was by doing a position of relative and then giving it a z index. And I'm going to you do other numbers if you wanted to here, but I just want to make sure this one was higher than the self. So. Then I went ahead and gave it a fixed height, and that was just to kind of help out with some additions and stuff when I was doing the animation later. But again, you could do different things. You don't have to do 100 pixels if you don't want to. And of course, because it's a ball, we're going to have it be the same width and height. And to be in the center, so we're going to do margin 0 and auto. So top and bottom margins are going to be 0, and then we're going to have side margin as being auto, which should center the ball when we render it on here in a bit. All right, and then so for the background, we are going to do, and we're going to do the ball. And then below that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the background. And we're going to call that just ball. And so what that's going to do is that's going to actually really render the background as ball. And it's going to come to this next one and go, oh, wait, no, never mind. I don't want to render it as ball. I actually want to render it as this. We'll never actually see the ball here unless for some reason this doesn't actually get rendered on somewhere. I don't think that'll be an issue with anyone that's probably doing this tutorial, but just kind of keep in mind, it just gives it something that it doesn't default back to a color that's undesirable or anything like that. So we went ahead and just did that there. But it would think from a display standpoint as if you did, as if you just did this. So, oops. Go ahead and put that back into the right now, though. Cool. And then finally, what we're going to do here is to actually make it round, because I save everything right now. When we take a look at that ball, our ball doesn't look really like a ball, does it? It looks like a big square here with a radial gradient inside of it. So to fix that, we're going to come back over here and we're going to do a border radius. And we're going to do a border radius of 50% here. And then do that, it's going to actually turn that into a spherical looking shape because of the gradient, but technically just a circle. So now we have made the ball itself. So the next step is to go ahead and that ball shadow. And to do that, we're going to basically do more or less the same thing. And I'm going to go ahead and just copy and paste that over. Since we talked about the border radius and how the variables work and all that stuff already. Only rule here is for that ball shadow. I changed the z-index down to a 0. So that way it's going to be behind this. Still a position relative. Height is going to be 25 pixels instead of 100 pixels because I actually want to be an oblong shape. And the width, of course, is going to be the same. The margin here, this was just me playing around with the positioning to get to where I actually wanted it to be in relation to the ball itself. And then, of course, the background is going to be shadow instead of this. And the border radius is still going to be 50% because we want it to look like a oval, so to speak. So when we do that, if I save this, what that gives us is this. So basically, we now have our initial keyframes and our starting point for the animation. So we have the ball up here, and then, of course, it's cast shadow down here. And now we want to go ahead and throw in the animations to get all of that moving. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add the animation. And I'm going to go ahead and put a space here because we're going to be cutting and pasting this later in another class that we're going to then call in Java assign to the actual ball over here and the ball shadow respectively. But for right now, just to get the animation going and everything, we're going to go ahead and just do it here inside of the initial classes. So for that, we're just going to do the animation property. And again, some of this I've actually played around with for a while. Just kind of bear with me as we type it out, and then I will kind of go over what each of the different elements are doing. So we're going to call this one bounce. And so here's where we're going to actually declare that variable of duration. The other way to write this, and I'll do the next one, is instead of writing the animation duration, we could just the amount of seconds that we wanted, or milliseconds, depending on how we're working. But in this case, I wanted to do it as variables because I don't want to have to change it in two different places if I wanted to change the time or the animation timing. For our animation timing, we're going to do ease in. We're going to have no delay. We want to play infinitely, and then we want to alternate. So, okay, so just to kind of go over these real quick. So what this is doing is we're making an animation. We're calling that animation bounce. We're then making a variable here that's going to represent the duration that we want it to occur in. So in this case, I want it to play for that long. And to start off slowly and then speed up as it moves on. I don't want it to have a delay, so I put 0 seconds here. I want it to continue to play indefinitely and tell it to stop. And here, what I want it to do is I want it to play all the way through, and then I want it to play in reverse, and then back again, and then back and back again. So that's where the alternate comes in here. So if you watched one of my my last video where I was doing the animation on button click, and then have these load after the animation played, I had that you would want to use ease in, ease out. I'm sorry, ease in and out for your time here if you were doing, say, a ball bounce. That's not what I'm doing here, though, because of how I have the structured, is we're basically going to be creating the same by having this alternate here. So what's going to happen is as it eases in, it's going to ease in from the top. It's going to come down. It's going to come down, come down, come down, and then get really towards the bottom. When I reverse that, it'll be fairly fast, and then it's going to start to slow down as it's up again because it's playing that same animation but in reverse. So effectively, you're still going to have it do a start where it's slow and then slow back in as it continues to play. Effectively, what I did is I did an ease it out, and I just cut it in half and then just reversed it second half. And that's just because I like writing out every keyframe, it moving both down and then back up. Cool. All right, and then for the ball shadow, I'm actually going to have basically the same animation. So it's going to copy and paste that. And only change there is we're going to change this from that to, we'll call this one bounce shadow. And the reason that I'm changing this to shadow instead of bounce, even though they're going to be the same thing, is because in there, for some reason, I might want to do something different with the shadow. Maybe make fade out or have a feather effect or something like that. And this not doing that, but I went ahead and just see the animation each one of these as a step. So at least for this, and also because later on when I do the keyframes, I'm actually going to do different for the shadow than I am for the bounce. So and again, we'll see that with the keyframes here in just a second. So cool. So we've now gone ahead and we've set up the animation, the timings, kind of how we want the animations to occur. So we're going to go ahead and save that. It's still not going to be anything on the screen because I actually set up the keyframes right now. So we're going to do that right now. And for this, actually going to just do a real simple one where the ball is going to just start moving up and down. So we're just going to say at keyframes, bounce, get that started. We're going to say, we're going to say 0, and we're going to give it a form. And we're going to translate Y because we're only doing the Y-axis on this. And that's going to actually be 0% to start off with. And then we're going to do scale X of 1, and we're going to do a scale also of 1. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take this, we're going to copy and paste this just below it, still inside of the keyframes though. And we're going to change that 0 to 100%. Oops, not that. To 100%, and make this 400%. So the reason I'm doing 400% here is if we look, the ball is 100 pixels. So, and the ball container is 400 pixels. So when I move it 400%, it's effectively moving 100 pixels. So that's going to move that down to the bottom, and that's why I did the 100 pixels here, was just to kind of make that calculation a little bit easier. Cool. So we're good there. So save all of that, and we come over here. As you can see, we now have a ball that is moving up and down, and it appears to start off a little bit slower, like it's being dropped, and then it gains speed, hits the ground, bounces back up, and then slows down, comes back to the top, and repeats and keeps going. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to change do the ball shadow, So we're going to change that shadow up. So we're going to do effectively the same thing here. We're going to say add keyframes, bounce, shadow, 0%, transform, scale. Again, we're only doing the Y, so we don't need to do an X here for this one. The shadow is actually going to be moving anywhere, so all it's going to do is just scale. So it's just going to get a little bit longer and then shrink back down again. And actually, you know what? For this one, I take that back. We already do the X and the Y values, so we'll just do first value should be your value, if I remember correctly. So we're going to say 1.15, and then we're going to say 1.15. And I can't remember if there's a comma or not, so we'll try it without the comma first, and then if we need it later. So. And down here, we're going to actually change that to 0.70. So what this should do, if we save it, is it should shadow, and I think we need a comma there. Yep. Okay, we did the commas there. So if we do that now, as you can see, as the ball starts out, the shadow is bigger. As it comes down, the shadow gets smaller, and then as it goes back up, the shadow gets bigger again. So it's just kind of trying to simulate that effect of light coming in from the top, and light when it hits, it spreads out. Therefore, it makes the shadow larger the higher or further away from the ground the object is in this case. So that just helps simulate that there. So now what we'll do is, if you notice on the animation itself, this works pretty good, right? I mean, for most purposes, I think this would be fine. However, like I said, I came from an animation background, so I want to go a little bit further, and I'm going to add some secondary motion. So I'm going to do an actual squash and stretch effect with this ball here. So what would happen, and if you watch even golf balls and things in slow motion, is when they are accelerating or they're moving, they'll actually appear to be a little bit deformed, right? They'll stretch a little bit longer, or they'll seem to stretch out a little bit taller, and they'll get skinnier. And then when they actually hit the ground, or they stop, or they're hit by, say, a baseball bat or a golf club head, they'll actually appear to flatten out and then stretch out accordingly as well. So that's what we call squash and stretch. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add in a few extra keyframes here to kind of create that effect. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in 3 keyframes for the ball itself, and then a few more on the shadow. And I'm just going to cut and paste because it was just a case of me sitting around and tweaking things until I got it to where I thought that it looked right. So go ahead and just do that real quick here. And we'll put those in. And I actually don't need that. I did that. And I don't need that because we aren't changing the color of the ball or anything as it turned out. So what we have here is basically, as the ball is starting its initial state, it's going to get a little bit longer y-axis here. So it's going to appear to get a little bit longer. And then in time, it's going to also get skinnier because it's stretching it out. Down here, you're going to have the same thing. It's going to go that way all the way until button. Then once it hits 90% is where it actually is the ground. And so it's going to start to actually now, instead of being stretched a long way, it's going to start to squish and then stretch outward. And that's what we're seeing down here. And then finally, I'm going to change this for the actual deformation at the bottom here. So it's going to flatten out and 2.5. And then again, we have to actually adjust this a little bit. What's going to happen is where the origin of the transform itself is going to stay in the same place. But as this gets shorter, it's not going to appear to hit the ground and kind of float back up. So actually, I'll kind of show that here. So what's happening right now, if I don't adjust that positioning at the end there, when I do that squash down here at the bottom, you can see it kind of like jumps a little bit there. And if I slow the animation down, you can really see what I'm talking about. Come back up here. That's why I declared that variable. If I come back in here and I change this to say 4, and we save that again, we can watch the animation now come down and see it kind of hits and it does this like weird little wobbly thing that we don't want at the end there. So what we want to do more smooth is we're going to fix this down here by changing that. And again, this was a value I had to play with until I liked the way it looked. And that value ended up being 412% here. And then I also will check here, yeah. Let's see, scale 1%, 0.10, plane. Oh, oops, my bad. I actually these. So that is going to be Y. This is going to be X. And that is going to be Y. And that is going to be X. Sorry about that. So now let's just make sure everything is doing what we want it to do. There we go. So now what we see here is the stretch effect kind of happens. So it kind of comes down, it hits the ground, it squashes itself, and it sort of rebounds, stretches back out, goes to the top, goes back to its normal size, begins to stretches back out, hits the ground, and then rebounds again, and then we keep repeating that. So one final thing, just to kind of fix it down here, because if we watch again really closely down here with the shadow, what's going to happen is even though the ball is now staying in the same spot, the shadow itself is still actually transitioning. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another keyframe here in the ball bounce shadow, and we're going to set that to the same percentage that we did here at 92%, because that's when the ball actually stops moving on the axis from a visible standpoint. So it actually is still moving here. And for that, we're going to use the same transform info that we're having here. And in that way, the shadow should stay at the exact same size until it begins to rebound again. So if we save this, and actually, because down here in the scaling, we actually have it where this is the X value, this is the Y value. I'm going to go ahead and change over here. And put it behind just to kind of keep things consistent. Actually, that's going to just be X and Y. And finally, Y again down here. Yep, and everything still works. So now we're going to go ahead and we'll speed that back up again so we can see it actually at real time. And to do that, come back up here and we'll just reset the animation duration back to that, hit save, and now we have the ball bouncing in real time. So I wanted to kind of show that because I wanted to show a couple different ways that we can use the scale property down here in the frames. So like I said, we can write it with both the X and the Y here like this, which is scale, or we can actually do scale X, scale Y if you wanted to. You can do the same thing with translate as well if you want in one line. And then also here, this is why I put the animation duration in, because if we hadn't done that, I would have had to have gone through here, changed it here and here each time. And so to just simplify that, I created this single variable up here. So cool. Now we've got your bouncing ball plays automatically here. Starts off, comes down, shadow adjusts accordingly, hits the ground, bounces, comes back up, and we have a looping animation. So cool. So now what we want to do though is we want to add some JavaScript in that we're going to connect to this button so that this button now control when this animation starts and stops. So we're going to do that in the next video because I think this one is long enough. So we will go ahead and sign out now. So make sure everything is saved, and I will see you in the next video where we do the JavaScript. Thank you, and I'll see you then.